Beastars is finally back after 3 long years with its final season. And what a season it's been, with Orange Studios upping the animation style, particularly the combination of the 2D and 3D animation that it's known for. Once again, we're thrown into a fantastically realistic world of anthropomorphic animals, where society deals with a rift between its herbivorous and carnivorous population, despite them trying to coexist. We see the protagonist Legoshi reject what makes him incredible as a grey wolf for the sake of coexisting in society. But there's a lot more to him than what meets the eye, and Season 3 has let us in on his backstory, mixed lineage as a partial Komodo dragon on his grandfather's side, contributing to him being larger than other wolves, and his mother having killed herself in fear of ostracization over her mixed lineage in a world where being mixed between two species is heavily frowned upon. The antagonist of this new season, Melon, is an eccentric character in and of himself, and his psychopathic actions are currently responsible for Legoshi's future being uncertain. But by spring 2025, we're going to get every answer, as the second core of the season will grace Netflix and bring the anime adaptation of Paro Itagaki's brilliant manga to an end. But before that happens, let's go over what we know about the series, its latest season, and what it means for the future of this franchise. A brief recap of Season 1 and 2. Beastars explores a world where herbivores and carnivores coexist as anthropomorphic animals belonging to various species. However, carnivores stay away from their natural diet of hunting herbivores down and instead procure their nutrition from bugs and eggs. The main cast attends a reputed school called the Deteriorating Academy, where things get complicated when a herbivore student named Tem, a kind-hearted alpaca, is eaten by an unidentified carnivore from the school. Society is harsh on both herbivores and carnivores, with the former struggling due to their natural weakness in the face of their stronger predators. Naturally, they live in constant fear of being devoured, even though the consumption of meat is considered to be a huge crime in society. The existence of a black market where meat is sold for the carnivores makes matters harder. On the other hand, carnivores, who try to coexist kindly, are often treated as social pariahs and outcasts for their natural hunting instincts and requirement for meat. This is where our protagonist Legoshi comes in, a carnivorous grey wolf who's a pacifist and deals with identity issues. Although he's the type to never hurt a fly, Legoshi's appearance leads to others blaming him for devouring Tem. Legoshi eventually meets a dwarf rabbit called Haru, who has a sexually expansive past due to her having felt weak and fragile as a result of her species. As a result, she relied on sexual intimacy to feel equal to others. However, a budding romance between her and the much larger wolf becomes the focal point of the story, as relationships between herbivores and carnivores deteriorate in society, and we're exposed to how difficult an interspecies relationship can be for herbivores and carnivores, as carnivores have to constantly fight their carnal instincts. There is also the model red deer named Lewis, who used to be livestock for the carnivores at the black market until he was bought off by a rich deer and became one of the best students at Cherryton. The trauma from being so weak in the face of adversity has resulted in him desiring power and respecting carnivorous hunting instincts. Lewis always tries his best, both in and out of school, but his relationship with carnivores complicates things a bit. More often than not, he has way more strength of character and will compared to his meat-eating counterparts, and at one point shoves his hand into Legoshi's mouth to make him accept his true nature. At one point, Haru is kidnapped by the Shishigumi, a gang or pride of lions who operate at the black market. On learning of her abduction, Legoshi rushes to save her and fights off many of the gang members. However, when the boss pulls a gun on Legoshi, Lewis arrives with his own to shoot him. As per the rules of the gang, whoever kills the boss becomes the next head, which leads to Lewis becoming the first herbivorous head of the Pride of Lions. However, he goes on to become a well-loved head. However, this also leads to Lewis having to drop out of Cherryton. Meanwhile, Legoshi learns that Tem had been devoured by a lovable brown bear called Riz from his drama club. However, it's revealed that Riz didn't do this intentionally. Mandatory medicine was issued for bears to keep their growth suppressed. However, it came with ill effects on his mental state. Believing it hampered his friendship with Tem, Riz stopped taking the medicine to form a closer bond. Unfortunately, this sent him out of control and he ended up killing his friend. With Cherryton not having produced a Beastar in a long time and Lewis dropping out, the committee also issues that whoever will take down the perpetrator of Tem's murder will automatically become the Beastar. Legoshi trains with the panda Gohin to defeat Riz but is overwhelmed. To help him, Lewis offers Legoshi his right foot so that the carnivore can tap into his potential. The moment symbolizes trust, sacrifice, and understanding. motivated by Lewis having immense respect for the naturally powerful and majestic carnivores. This allows Legoshi to stand on his own in battle until Riz accepts defeat. While he gets arrested, so does Legoshi on the grounds of devouring Lewis's right foot. Fortunately for him, he's released early as Lewis testifies for him. Meanwhile, Lewis is able to leave the Shishigumi as the lion free shoots down Ibuki, who had grown very protective over Lewis, following which he warns Lewis to stay away from the black market. However, the incident with Riz, as well as Legoshi devouring Lewis's foot, worsens relationships between herbivores and carnivores and makes Legoshi's life and a future with his herbivore lover far more complex, which is what the final season dives into. The events of Final Season Core 1. New plot points, characters, and problems are introduced into the story, which now crosses over the high school premise and enters a more sinister, mature territory. We take a deeper dive into the criminal underworld, while Legoshi, now an adult wolf, grapples with the consequences of devouring a foot. Episode 1. An Itchy Collar. The episode opens with a horse named Yahya, the current Beastar, reading a report of Legoshi devouring Lewis's leg during the fight with Riz. The incident had led to Legoshi dropping out of Cherryton of his own accord. To provide for himself, he got a delivery job in an udon shop and relocated to the dilapidated Beast's apartment. Having tasted meat, Legoshi found himself suffering from insane withdrawals, with his veins reddened, howls screeching, and his body squirming in bed. This was made worse by the fact that Legoshi wanted to make the world a safer place for Haru, but his true nature as a carnivore made him weak to his carnal desires. The next morning, a conversation between Gohin and Legoshi led to the latter learning that because Legoshi had acquired a criminal record of devouring to his name, interspecies marriage between him and a herbivore had become prohibited by law. This meant that Legoshi could never marry Haru, creating a ripe contrast between his reality and his desire to lead a happy family life with her. His withdrawal breakdowns continued, disturbing his neighbor, a lamb named Seven. Having had enough of the noise, Seven reached Legoshi's apartment, the door to which was unlocked. She found him under a blanket wailing in pain and tried to approach. Unfortunately, this resulted in a manic Legoshi pouncing on her as he drooled profusely due to his true nature as a carnivore. Meanwhile, Lewis had a prosthetic leg fitted onto the one that he had offered Legoshi. The incidents with the carnivores devouring led to Cherryton Academy introducing a new segregation policy in the school where herbivores and carnivores, instead of intermixing, were separated by seating arrangements and classes. Legoshi's close friend, the golden retriever Jack, had gotten selected for the advanced classes. The celebration of his success was suddenly interrupted by a phone call for Legoshi's grandfather, who was supposed to know about Legoshi having dropped out. He also claimed that he couldn't get a hold of his grandson as his phone plan had been cancelled. A slight plot twist was then introduced with a glimpse of Legoshi's grandpa's hand, which looked scaly and reptilian instead of resembling a wolf. Elsewhere, Haru reflected on her future with Legoshi after witnessing her friend Ako's injury following a physical intimacy issue with her lion boyfriend Ito, with the passerby herbivores passing negative comments on interspecies relationships between the two factions. At the black market, we witnessed a ritual being held for Meat Loving Day, with Saiga claiming how the day had become an excuse for a turf war for the different gangs in the present day. Saiga also had a new customer, who he sensed not to be a carnivore. Soon, the mysterious customer slashed Saiga's throat. With Lewis having left the Shishigumi, the Pride of Lions was left without a leader. Struggling to keep themselves afloat, the gang managed by making drugs using ingredients from rodents, with their focus on being able to acquire ivory. Just then, a new player entered the ring, dropped a tusk on the floor, and attacked the Pride as he declared himself to be their new boss. This new beast was the same one who had killed Saiga. Episode 2. The Shiny Black Nose Before Me. A ravenous Legoshi drooled and growled over the herbivorous lamb Seven, trying his best to resist the urge for herbivore meat. As he began to regain his senses, Seven looked around his room and realized that Legoshi was just a teenager. Ultimately, she offered to help him out with a job as she spotted that Legoshi wore shoes from the brand where she worked. She later took him to the store. While at work, Seven was intercepted by two of her carnivorous co-workers who used to harass her by calling her a little lamb. Although she wanted to stand her ground on her own, Legoshi stepping out scared off the other carnivores, making matters worse when he defended her against them. His sheer size was enough to scare them away. Seven was unhappy with how easily the carnivores gave up simply because Legoshi was bigger. She lamented over how, despite being an adult, others were more likely to respect a bigger carnivorous teen over her simply due to an unfair social hierarchy. This led to Legoshi realizing that Seven dealt with problems he never even thought about. Just then, a nearby officer mistook their minor argument for Legoshi threatening Seven and threatened to report her. simply judging him based on his more aggressive appearance, opening up the conversation about how both of them had two different types of struggle in society, but they struggled nonetheless. Meanwhile, a new energy drink named Kines was out on the streets, and it was gaining notoriety for making the carnivores more aggressive. Lewis had found one of the lions from Cherryton with an empty can of Kines and realized that the lion's hands were shaking and twitching in a manner similar to that of meat withdrawals. He flipped the lion over his head. The red deer had been going through his own personal complications during that time, as he and the wolf Juno had ended up kissing one another while she was examining her prosthetic leg. The Shishigumi gang was seen dealing with their new possible boss, who was trying to get Kines to be sold into the mainstream market. Initially, the other lions were unwilling to bend over on seeing the ivory tusk, but the new character shut them up by dropping an elephant head. Kines was also revealed to have the flesh and bones of herbivores, which is why it satisfied the meat cravings of carnivores and increased their desire for the same thing, thus luring them to the black market where they could be sold meat. At the same time, Yahya had rats working for him as informants as they were investigating the Kines drug. While Legoshi returned home for work, some carnivores tried to sell Kines to him by promising a boost in carnivore stamina. Initially, Legoshi turned down this offer, claiming that he had enough stamina. However, as the can was opened, the fumes filled Legoshi's senses, who was already suffering from meat withdrawals. Episode 3: The Old Dragon's Wrath. The situation between Legoshi and the carnivores pushing him to sell Kines escalated. Legoshi's refusal caused one of the pushers to slash his muzzle with a knife, causing a one-sided fight between both sides, with Legoshi emerging victorious as he had gotten carried away by his carnivorous nature. The altercation was observed by Yahya's rats. At a dairy plant, we witness Yahya holding a carnivore by the throat and claiming how society was only able to function because herbivores were tolerant towards carnivores. Soon, he learned from his rodent information about the fight between Legoshi and the beast trying to sell him Kines. Yahya lamented over not being able to protect the entire city and missed his old partner. That very night, a lizard approached Legoshi. He stuck his finger inside his own mouth to reveal a purple venom. The lizard then stuck that venom inside Legoshi's mouth, and it was revealed that the lizard was a Komodo dragon who was Legoshi's grandfather. This move was done as a Komodo dragon's venom didn't affect its own kind and solidified Legoshi's status as an interspecies hybrid in a shocking twist. The two rekindled at a restaurant called Benny's. Legoshi accused his grandfather, named Gosha, over not helping his mother. We also learned that Legoshi was raised to be a pacifist by Gosha himself. Soon, some birds entered Benny's and began to harass Gosha over being a Komodo dragon, but are stopped by the restaurant owner and a growlingly hostile Legoshi who wanted to defend his grandfather. That night, while walking down an alley, the birds returned and pushed Legoshi face down, incurring Gosha's wrath. To Legoshi's surprise, Gosha proved to be an extremely skilled combatant as he slashed through the opponents and beat them down like a hot knife on butter. Episode 4: The Gravity of Being a Land Dweller. Episode 4 witnessed Lewis on a date with a doe named Azuki. Their possible marriage was prearranged by their families, but as the two of them got intimate later that day, Lewis battled how strange he felt being with her as he had a sexual preference for carnivores, specifically Juno. Despite Azuki being of his species and Lewis trying his level best to be into her, he couldn't continue with the loveless arrangement. The birds from the fight against Gosha rejuvenated themselves by drinking Kines. As one of them got aggressive, they were soon thwarted by Yahya, who ended up learning about Gosha having fought them. We soon learned that Yahya's partner back in the day was none other than Gosha himself, and the two dreamt of becoming Beastars together. However, one night they saved a female wolf who was quick to become enamored by Gosha's scales. The Komodo dragon and the wolf soon began to date and became an interspecies couple, with the wolf getting impregnated within 6 months of them being together. The revelation that Gosha's new goal was to have a family with the wolf instead of being Beastars with Yahya didn't sit well with the latter, causing the two to fall out. In the present day, the rat informants let Yahya know about Legoshi's relationship with Gosha. Later that day, Legoshi was tasked with delivering udon to their aquatic customers, which led to Legoshi meeting the spotted seal named Sagwan. He learned from the seal about marine life, where the circle of life was respected, as bigger fish ate smaller fish in the waters, unlike on land where carnivores and herbivores tried to coexist. This led to Legoshi ruminating over what kind of a peace the aquatic species might have that was impossible on land. He also ended up getting a letter for Yahya. Episode 5: In the Food Chain. The Shishigumi were unhappy with their new boss, who didn't have the etiquette and dignity of meat-eating and hunting the way lions did. They were also tasked by their new boss with attending a masquerade party to meet a civet called Deshiko, the head of an organization called Kopi Luwak, which stood dead against the intermingling of species. The new boss wanted to introduce a new drug into the market, and Deshiko was there to help with just that. It was soon revealed that the drug called Melda was made with ivory, the ingredients of kines, and blood gathered by Deshiko's army of bats. The finished product was what accumulated after the ingredients passed through the civet and were excreted, and it had an effect stronger than that of kines. With the iron fist of the new boss, the lions had no choice but to accept becoming distributors of this new drug. The letter Legoshi had received from Yahya was an invitation to dinner. Legoshi eventually realized that Yahya was an antagonistic carnivore who used his carnivore enemies as fertilizer to grow carrots, and he was dead against carnivores as a whole, believing in the superiority of herbivores in society over carnivores. He had always hated his former partner Gosha for choosing to get together with a carnivorous female wolf, as he despised the idea of a mixed species family. In Legoshi's presence, Yahya kicked the wolf down and forced him to beg for forgiveness for devouring Lewis's leg. A desperate Legoshi eventually pulled out his own fangs to prove himself. Episode 6: The Guy Born in Spring. The fight between Legoshi and Yahya escalated, with Legoshi punching Yahya in return for the horse's kick. Legoshi then asserted his ideology over the different and nuanced experiences between carnivores and herbivores being a good thing, and left, while Yahya recognized Legoshi's potential. Legoshi ran off to Gohin at the black market for treatment and got a pair of replacement fangs. Meanwhile, Gohin had been treating patients suffering from meat withdrawals specifically due to kines. One of the patients he'd been treating was a canine who had accidentally eaten a deer she might have known. Meanwhile, Legoshi learned about his grandfather having been Yahya's partner and realized that they probably fell out due to Yahya's distaste for interspecies relationships. Via the information collected by the rats, Yahya had gotten a tip about a gazelle therapist who might have been responsible for killing elephants for ivory. He investigated the site and overheard an elephant client talking to the therapist, professing his ease as the therapist was a herbivore too. However, Yahya soon learned that it was a pre-recording that was being played, which meant that the gazelle knew about the Beastars shenanigans. Right then, the gazelle attacked the horse. He wore a pink shirt proving that he was the new boss of the Shishigumi. To top it off, the gazelle took off his face mask, which always covered the lower half of his face. Once off, Yahya realized that he was a mix between a gazelle and a leopard, and as a result, not a herbivore. His name was Melon, and he shot Yahya with a horse tranquilizer. At university, Haru got into a confrontation with her friend Ako and called her relationship with her carnivorous lion boyfriend Ito being one for show. Deep down, she was jealous of their complex relationship working out while her romance with Legoshi had so many obstacles. Later that day, Ako and Ito got into an argument about them dating for show, and she asked him to kiss her. The two of them eventually made out, but it resulted in Ako getting killed, with Ito's muzzle being full of her blood. Episode 7: Eat My Vow. This episode explores Legoshi and Haru going out on Legoshi's birthday date, which eventually led them to the black market, as it was Haru's wish to know everything about the one she loved. She had also learned everything about the incident with Lewis and Riz from Legoshi himself, and didn't seem to mind the events too much. At the black market, however, the sight of the rabbits behind glass walls made Haru confess how much she hated being born as a weak little rabbit. But now that she had Legoshi by her side, she felt better and wanted him to kiss her. Legoshi, however, chickened out due to his devouring history. He wanted to wait things out as he wanted to have children in the future, but knew about the complications of having mixed species kids. The next day, Lewis handed over a can of kines to a worker at Horn's Research to have its ingredients analyzed. He later met with Juno, but the fact that Lewis had to return to his fiancée and could not be with Juno was a problem for the Grey Wolf. She blew off steam by crying about her complicated interspecies relationship with Legoshi. She mentioned how she had been gaining weight due to an increased appetite after she began to like Lewis, which made her worry about her love being nothing but just her carnal desire to eat Lewis. Soon after, a vlogger showed up asking about their opinions on interspecies relationships. Juno ended up taking the camera and professing her love for the red deer as she had a breakdown. Episode 8: What Lies at the End of the Melon Patch. A delivery trip at the black market led to Legoshi learning that Yahya was dead, hence why the customers were celebrating, as they could now sell all the meat that they wanted. However, Yahya was soon proven to be alive, deducing the situation with Melon alongside his rat informants, who he tasked with tailing the lions at the Shishigumi. Yahya visited the black market later while a medical hamster was trying to take a turtle out of the shell the latter was trying to sell. Yahya almost kicked the hamster down to threaten him into revealing who had been supplying the ivory. Frightened, the hamster let spill that the supplier was a gazelle with a face mask, automatically letting Yahya know that it was Melon. Later, the rats tail the Shishigumi as two of the lions were driving to Deshiko's place to procure the superdrug Melda. Due to the unusual nature of its production, as it was deer droppings, the lions were unhappy with the lack of quantity, but Deshiko assured that the quality made up for it. The lions then returned to their hideout with the rats tailing them, where the latter learned about the Shishigumi hosting a masquerade party. They also found several gas masks in the cartons the lions had. Yahya intercepted Legoshi in the wolf's own house and revealed the truth about the mixed breed Melon. He also pointed out Melon was worse than a carnivore who devoured others, as he pretended to be a herbivore, lured in more herbivores, killed them, and then didn't even eat them. That meant Melon was killing others just for the sake of it. Yahya wanted Legoshi on Melon's case, especially now that he was a horse with a crippled leg, and offered 10 million, knowing full well that Legoshi would need that money to start a family. Legoshi, however, turned down the offer as he knew that Yahya was only doing so due to his familial connection with Gosha. However, Yahya revealed that his true intention was to make Legoshi see the repercussions of mixing a herbivore with a carnivore, with Melon being a type of being that Legoshi and Haru would eventually produce if they were to start a family. Episode 9, The Rotten Egg Hatches. Yahya and Legoshi met at an abandoned strip club called Jungle Theater, where Legoshi was tasked with being chaperone to an Okapi dancer named Cosmo, who would be performing at Melon's masquerade. For helping take Melon down, Yahya offered to wipe off Legoshi's devouring charges, giving him a clean record which would eventually allow him to marry Haru. While inside the party, Legoshi came across Melon in the restroom and was quick to realize that the masked herbivore was the one that he had been looking for, as Legoshi's canine senses allowed him to sense the meat in Melon's urine. He tailed after his scent and let Yahya in on it, as Melon announced to his guests from the security booth his intention of serving the hyperdrug named Melda at the party. While Legoshi was distracted, Melon snuck up on him and was quick to know that he had been put to work by Yahya. Due to Melon's mixed heritage, Legoshi assumed a relaxed demeanor in front of his predator and tried to engage in a genuine conversation with him, all while Melon participated in it like it was just theatrics. We also learned that Legoshi's mother had killed herself when he was 12 after life as a mixed being got too hard for her. When Melon referred to himself as a freak of nature for being mixed, Legoshi went an extra limb to call him beautiful, but Melon was never one for such sentimentalities. He quickly took Legoshi's microchip, gave the horse a glimpse of the gray wolf, and shot him, before running away while Legoshi's body fell to the floor. Meanwhile, the mayor had met with Ogma to address the rising in devourings. The topic of the black market came up, and we learned that Lewis was not Ogma's biological child, but he was one of the animals who was being sold as live bait at the black market 15 years prior. Back when such a tradition existed. Ogma bought Lewis from the market and raised him. The mayor only brought it up to be able to blackmail Ogma, as he needed a favor from the Horns conglomerate. Episode 10, Bambi is alive and well. Lewis got his hands on the ingredient breakdown of kines and realized that it had meat proteins, but not enough to cause intoxication in carnivores. To help him, his worker led him to a shady researcher, Deshiko, from Kopi Luwak. This eventually led Lewis to the black market, where he was spotted by his former underlings, the pride of lions at the Shishigumi. Free had promised to kill Lewis if he ever saw him at the black market again, so he pulled out his gun, with Lewis openly accepting death. However, Free used this as an excuse to knock off his antlers and hug his former boss. Lewis was then taken to the Shishigumi's place, and the lions tried to help him with his investigation, as Lewis's worker had tipped him to Kopi Luwak. Soon, Melon returned and Lewis had to be hidden. Sensing an intruder, Melon stabbed the paws of one of the lions with a fork, but another from the pride was able to hide Lewis by bringing the shot-down antlers to Melon, using it to lie about losing control and eating a deer. After Melon's departure, the lions learned about Lewis's investigation of kines and were conflicted about it. Legoshi found himself at the hospital after getting shot by Melon and was at a crossroads between life and death when he had a seemingly out-of-body experience as his soul left his body. During this time, he met his mother, Liano, who had died about 6 years ago. With Legoshi opening up about his concerns with having a mixed child, Liano opened up about her life to him. Despite being mixed, she looked like a wolf and, as a result, wanted to hide her heritage as part Komodo dragon after becoming a famous model. She saw massive success, but everything took a turn for the worse when her body started showing green scales in places. As the condition escalated, Liano entered a massive state of panic over being considered dangerous, venomous, monstrous, or a freak by society. Before taking her own life, she spent a night hugging Legoshi as he slept, and was oblivious to him having been awake. Meanwhile, Legoshi saw his mother's fur and scales and found it extremely beautiful. The next day, Liano took her life. This conversation led to Legoshi coming back to his body and visiting his mother's grave, where he howled at the full moon. Episode 11, Peeling Back the Layers. Lewis went undercover as Gamo from Horn's Pharmacy and met Deshiko and Kopi Luwak. He tried to shed light on the ingredients of the drink being responsible for increasing devourings. However, Deshiko showed him a test that the drink only caused such complications in carnivores who had already eaten meat in the past, but not in those who had never consumed any meat. He played the game with Lewis, claiming how consumption of meat was illegal, so quinés being sold should be fine unless they were willing to overlook illegal consumption of meat while vilifying an energy drink. Right then, Deshiko revealed that he knew about Gamo being Lewis, who was formerly the boss of the Shishi Gumi. Meanwhile, his interest was in the new mixed-breed boss, Melon, as Deshiko loved researching such creatures, as they could have genetic anomalies that would cause super senses or mutations such as no libido or appetite. Elsewhere, Legoshi wished to talk to Melon again and tried to find him. He came across the spotted seal Sagwan at the bath, and outside the bathhouse, he witnessed the seal eat octopus. After they left, Melon bought fried octopus from the same place, after which we learned that he was one of those mixed breeds who had anomalies. Melon was deprived of the taste buds of both herbivores and carnivores. He had no appetite and no libido. The only thing that made him alive was the physical pain of getting a tattoo, so he visited the tattoo parlor named Blue Dragon, where the sloth was tasked with covering his appearing leopard spots with melon leaves, as usual. This scene was graphic in the sense that Melon was shown to have something of a sexual reaction to the physical pain. Legoshi eventually reached Blue Dragon as he tried to sniff out Melon, but the latter was gone by the time the wolf arrived. He found himself looking at a sloth covered in blood from his previous tattoo appointment. The sloth's slow reaction in speech led to him still speaking as if he were talking to Melon, which allowed Legoshi to realize Melon had just been there. Finale episode, Detailed View, the partial success of Lewis, and the absolute failure of Legoshi. The finale episode of the season, Tragedy on the Waves, was a ride to say the least, and it ended on a cliffhanger, literally. For starters, we have Lewis infiltrating Yahya's building as his plan was to meet the former Beastar and discuss his discovery with respect to quinés being a narcotic. He pretended to be from the crime prevention department in front of the receptionist to get a pass, and then tried to get to the top floor where Yahya lived via the stairs. However, the building went up to level 108 and Lewis was already having a lot of troubles with his leg, but the stairs ended at the 100th floor until Lewis found a secret elevator to the 108th floor. To reach there, he had to use the emergency exit, alerting the guards about his presence. Two of the security guards, a bear and a tiger, tried to hunt down Lewis while he did a good job escaping initially, but he was eventually caught by the tiger cop. While being escorted down the elevator, he told the cop that quinés was a narcotic. He didn't believe Lewis, laughing at his allegation as he claimed that he had drank some himself. Right then, it was shown that the tiger had meat intoxication, as his eyes were reddened and he was drooling profusely, desperate for meat. Lucky day for him, he was inside an elevator going down 100 floors with a one-legged herbivore. In a state of frenzy, the tiger cop attacked Lewis, who put his prosthetic leg inside the mouth of the tiger to protect himself. Being handcuffed, he couldn't do anything to free himself until Yahya arrived himself and knocked out the tiger. Lewis informed the Beastar about quinés being a narcotic, which had to be stopped, and the horse encouraged Lewis to do so on his own. While in the lobby, an idol was present with press and media, creating the perfect stage for Lewis to send out his message. As the tiger cop found himself on stage and was being tackled by the other cops, Lewis took the opportunity to reveal his findings, which was substantiated by the tiger in front of them, suffering from the symptoms in real time, and showed his research reports. While he was on air, his prosthetic leg, which was supposed to be a secret, was visible. Later that day, Lewis got chewed out by his adoptive father for his television stunt as the family of his fiancée Azuki marketed quinés. The fiasco led to the stocks of both their and Azuki's family plummeting, making Horn's conglomerate look bad. Ogma accused Lewis of trying to crash the marriage and showed concern over him not being into women. However, that wasn't the problem. Ogma's primary issue was Lewis showing little interest in female deer, which would go on to be a problem for their family, and that part was very true as Lewis was into carnivores, specifically the gray wolf Juno. However, Ogma made the amount of money he spent on buying Lewis clear, adding weight to the fact that Lewis had to be the heir to Horn's conglomerate. Meanwhile, Legoshi had an interesting experience at the Blue Dragon, catching on to the sloth's delayed speech and a possible conversation with a now absent Melon. As per what Legoshi heard, he deduced that Melon had been venting about being lonely, possibly due to his heritage as a mixed-race species. This made Legoshi soften up more towards this psychopathic criminal, as he began to think that Melon did what he did because he was always alone and had been ostracized by society. At some point, the sloth mentioned a location called the Droplet of the Reaper, which was a clue. Legoshi went to a cafe and searched the location, which was revealed to be a beautiful beachside with natural stone carvings. He then went to the beach and sat by the water, thinking about Haru. He desired to experience this with Haru, or his canine friends, and even his neighbor Seven. He then thought about Melon being lonely and wished to simply talk to him and come to an understanding. Right then, Legoshi got a gunshot to his ear. The shooter was none other than Melon himself. As Melon appeared, he mocked the sloth's manner of speech and revealed that it was all a trap just to lure Legoshi in. He mocked Legoshi for falling prey to a false sense of tragedy on Melon's behalf and revealed that he had super hearing, which wasn't uncommon for a mixed species, as anomalies were common in such cases. Melon then had Legoshi tied to a chair and taken up to the highest cliff overlooking the ocean, ready to throw him down. What confused Legoshi was why Melon was going so far to take him out, since he didn't pose any legal or criminal threat to Melon. To this, Melon revealed that it was all for fun. The inability to experience normal human feelings such as hunger, pleasure, love, or even the taste of food was responsible for Melon's psychopathic tendencies, making him do theatrical and extreme stuff just for the sake of fun. He claimed to love the face of someone who was afraid of death and strangled Legoshi, pushing him off the edge of the cliff. With Legoshi's fate in question, the scene shifted to Haru at the university, whose friend was suggesting she break up with Legoshi as he hadn't spoken to her in a while. Soon, it was revealed that the teacher in their class was Melon with his surgical mask on. Future of the franchise. What to expect from Core 2. Season 3, Part 2 will continue to deal with the storyline of the underworld now that Part 1 has ended on such a cliffhanger. As the protagonist, Legoshi definitely has plot armor on his side, so there's no way he's gonna die immediately. Melon's presence in Haru's university also means that he's going to toy with her life, since he happens to know about what's going on with Legoshi and finds pleasure in causing suffering just for the hell of it. Legoshi now has a future to look forward to, since Yahya has offered to give him a clean slate by wiping out his devouring record. While he will be accepting of a mixed species offspring between him and Haru, it's hard to say how the world outside will treat their child, since an overwhelming majority seem to be against interspecies marriages and relationships. We also have Lewis, whose investigation into Kinez should lead him to Melon as well, resulting in Legoshi and him working together to bring down the psychopath. The joining of hands between a carnivorous wolf and a herbivorous deer to take down their common enemy should ideally help bridge the gap between the two factions in the world of Beastars. Of course, we also expect the romantic subplot involving Juno and Lewis to escalate, now that he's already gotten himself into trouble with Azuki's family. Because Beastars at its core is a coming-of-age story, it's highly possible for Lewis to finally accept the way of his heart and choose to be with Juno, despite the social incompatibilities, instead of sticking to a path that has been picked out for him. Similarly, Legoshi might let go of his distaste towards certain carnivores feasting on meat, as he is coming to understand the circle of life via his interactions with Sagwan and even Haru, who was not unnerved at the black market, as she knew that what the carnivores were doing was natural. It's expected of Legoshi to be heavily involved in taking Melon down, and the Pride of Lions at the Shishigumi might help him out with this, not so much for the sake of Legoshi, but for Lewis. Either way, it's not impossible to see how the loose ends can be tied, but for now, our greatest query is simple. How on earth is Legoshi going to survive the fall? Marvelous verdict! The show takes inspiration from George Orwell's Animal Farm, as well as the Japanese sentiment that a nail that sticks up gets hammered down. In a world where standing out is discouraged, people who are born a certain way face their daily obstacles regardless of whether they wish to fit in or not. The situation is aggravated when you live in a world full of different species and are bound to be unique as a result, which makes fitting in a task for everyone. But with a little time, mutual understanding, self-acceptance, and some growth in the mindset of the broader populace, coming of age shouldn't be impossible. With that, today's video comes to an end. What did you think? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below, and until next time, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.